Hello, my name is Sam Brinton. I use they and them as my pronouns, and I get to serve as the Vice President of Advocacy and Government Affairs for the TREVOR Project, which is the nation's LGBTQ suicide prevention and crisis intervention program. A little fact about me, I actually graduated from MIT with graduate degrees in nuclear engineering, where I used to disarm nuclear bombs, but now I work in the much more complex field of LGBT politics. I am going to talk about politics today. We are a nation divided, and it is very difficult to understand how we could ever get out of this mess. How do we save lives? How do we decriminalize mental illness? How do we do any of the basic functions with a government so at odds with each other? Well, I'm here today to tell you about a really bright spot, a moment of bipartisanship, passage of the National Suicide Hotline Designation Act that will save many lives by preventing suicide and preventing police intervention in those suicides as well. It's three simple numbers, 988. Three simple digits that are going to be able to make sure that you get access to a simple and sustainable system of suicide prevention. Just like we call 911 when we see a car accident, we'll be able to call 988 in July of 2022 and get access to the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline. The TREVOR Project has been there for more than 20 years, providing suicide prevention services via a lifeline to LGBTQ youth from across the country. And so too has the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline been able to serve a variety of LGBTQ youth and, of course, straight and cisgender youth all over the nation. But the story actually begins with Senator Orrin Hatch. Senator Orrin Hatch from Utah, a state having significant challenges of suicide, stepped up to the plate and passed the National Suicide Hotline Improvement Act. The National Suicide Hotline Improvement Act made sure that we understood that there was fixes that could be made. How could we make it easier to access suicide prevention rather than harder? And how would we go about doing that? He was followed up with Representatives Chris Stewart and Representative Seth Moulton. Unlikely allies from across the aisle came together and said, we will make sure that the National Suicide Hotline Designation Act moves forward and actually builds on Senator Orrin Hatch's Improvement Act to have a three-digit, simple, easy-to-remember number for those in crisis. And that leads us to Ajit Pai, the Federal Communications Commissioner, who said, as a fellow Kansan to me, I understand what it's like to feel lost and lonely. I want there to be somewhere easy for us to call. And the Federal Communications Commission, in their technical aspects, designated 988 as the number to call. It wouldn't be a complete story without Senator Cory Gardner. Senator Cory Gardner, a Republican going for election in the great state of Colorado, also a challenging place for suicide prevention right now, who in the midst of an election and understanding the political risk, put together the National Suicide Hotline Designation Act, and I am proud to say brought about a unanimous vote for the National Suicide Hotline Designation Act, first there in the Senate and then in the House with a signature by the President. Yes, a unanimous vote in this day and age was only possible because it was about something we could all agree on, the need to save lives. Saving lives takes a lot of different forms, but 988 will do it by de-escalating crisis before a policeman ever arrives. It's important as an aspect of this bill to remember that LGBTQ youth are actually specifically mentioned in the bill as a group needing specialized services. These specialized services are going to make sure that if I call as a transgender individual, I get the support I need, how I need it. And yes, with unanimous passage for an LGBTQ inclusive bill, that was a first in history. LGBTQ youth across this country are in crisis. More than 1.8 million in crisis and seriously considering suicide each and every year. They come from all walks of life, and it is important for us to remember that they deserve these kinds of services. We know at the TREVOR Project, through our national survey, that 40% of LGBTQ youth will seriously consider suicide this year, with more than 50% of trans and non-binary youth seriously considering suicide. We are in moments of crisis, but it is not just us. We need to remember that our LGBTQ youth and our youth coming from a variety of different racial backgrounds, including Black lives, are also in crisis. This is a photo of about 20 of the now more than 40 trans women of color who have died a violent death this year alone. We are in crisis, and it is not always safer for us to interact with the police. I cannot be clear about this enough. Decriminalization comes in many forms. A suicide prevention lifeline number is decriminalization by making sure LGBTQ youth and all individuals who may call a lifeline talk to a person trained in suicide prevention rather than have to interact with police, which could escalate the situation. This is how we save lives. This is the last photo I will show, and it is me at World Pride being happy back when we could walk in these types of parades. But it's also about remembering that we have to be able to be in the streets. We have to do the work both politically and privately. We have to make sure that decriminalization starts and ends with a simple act of kindness. If you want to take that first step of kindness, you can text TREVOR, TREVOR, to the number 40649 to help us decriminalize by supporting suicide prevention.